Hello, world. This is Lucas Barra. We're here for the fifth installment of the show Dreamchasers, which is a show that promotes CEOs, musicians, athletes, and people from all walks of life on the road to achieving their dreams. I started this show with the idea of having a place where people can go and share their experiences, insights, and pick up on how other people like themselves are getting to success, because achieving your dreams is an extremely big feat, and having like-minded peers to learn from and inspire you are extremely useful. Today, I'm very excited to have Blake Cavignac on the show. Blake currently runs Young Pro Elite in Denver, and this is going to be the actual first Google Hangout on air that I've done. Blake is actually in Denver, so the first non-San Diego interview. Very excited to have Blake on the show. What's up, Blake?
Doing well, Lucas. I appreciate you having me on. It's funny, it might be the first one that's not with you in person, but we definitely have that San Diego connection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can already tell I'm repping already. And you got the appropriate Denver attire on.
Yeah, I may have the appropriate attire, but I'm definitely remaining true to the powder blue, to the Chargers. Definitely not a Denver Bronco fan.
Good to hear. We might have a problem with that, and I will stick with that for all our listeners who are Broncos fans. We are coming for you this year. That's not a dream. It's a reality. Watch out. So, Blake, Young Pro Elite is a very exciting business. Why don't you start by telling everyone about Young Pro Elite, how you came up with the idea, what it is, etc.
Of course. So I'll start with the vision so you can get a bigger idea of where we're going to go. What it essentially is going to consist of is chapters around the country that contain anywhere from 15, 20, up to 50 to 60 young professionals within a market. And what we do is we partner with organizations that have young professionals within their companies who are then responsible for running the chapters. Now, what the young professionals' roles are is going out and recruiting other members to join their chapters, and then they're actually going to be leading. They're going to be facilitating each of the monthly themes that we've built out, and then continuing from then on out, they essentially put themselves in a peer-to-peer relationship, almost in many ways to a mentorship type of role, because of the skills, values, and expertise that they bring to the group. Creating an environment that really allows young professionals to grow professionally, and also gives them a peer group that they can come to with any challenges, problems, issues that they may be facing, and they can get answers. They can get ideas and insights from other young professionals about how they'd handle similar situations and circumstances, hopefully helping them make the best decision possible.
Wow, yeah, that sounds awesome. I know you guys just had one of your first actual meetings in Denver. How'd that go?
Great. We had about 20 people there. We've now run a couple other chapters as well, and we've also brought on 2 other chapters. One is in Detroit, the other is in Florida, and we're close to bringing on 3 more. So by the end of the year, the goal is going to be to have 10 chapters around the country, hopefully a couple chapters in Canada as well.
Wow.
And so far, so good. Positive feedback thus far.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit more about what's actually happening in the meetings?
Yeah, so essentially the meetings focus on 2 things. The first is professional development. To give you an example, the typical meeting will last anywhere from 75 to 90 minutes. And when we talk about professional development, what we've done is we've built out a program for 13 months. So in months 1, we'll focus on assessment. You know, it's the idea that you can't get to where you want to go unless you know of where you're starting at this point. You know your strengths and weaknesses. Month 2, we'll get into vision and goals. Month 3, productivity. And then throughout the rest of the months, we built out a course that really focuses on the fundamentals of what young professionals need to master in order to become and reach certain levels in their career. Now, you all know, the industry you're in, you can master the mechanics. People can teach you the mechanics, but 80% of a lot of business comes down to your psychology. And that's really what the focus of these Young Pro League chapters is around, is making sure that these young professionals have that right psychology that they need to succeed. Because as you know, like being in sales or running your own company, you're going to face failure. You're going to face challenges. There are going to be a lot of problems and issues that you have to deal with every day. And if you don't have the right mental capacity, you're going to struggle. And with this Dreamchasers podcast that you're running, you're talking with CEOs, you're talking with people who are trying to push themselves, excel to certain standards in their lives. And I'm sure you've already began to realize that in order for them to get to where they want to go, they've got to be sharp mentally. And that's really what the focus of the Young Pro League program is on.
Absolutely. I don't know if there's a quote unquote success doctor as far as the nickname goes right now, but whenever I see you, whether it's on LinkedIn with your posts or just in general, I always think of the success doctor, because you always have I read your articles and it's fascinating, because the psychology of success is something that I feel like you know a lot about, and I think that's something that our listeners would enjoy hearing about, and kind of your experiences as far as what you do to kind of put yourself in the right mindset to have success on a daily basis.
Well, first, I really appreciate it. I'm far from a doctor, and there's a lot of other people out there who know far more than I do. That being said, though, it's something that I try to constantly work at each day, and the reason being, growing up, playing football, snowboarding, mountain biking, I've had a lot of concussions. I've had 13 or 14 concussions, and I've really experienced the downsides of what those are as far as mental capacity goes. And for me to stay, or at least to try to stay as mentally sharp as I can, I constantly have to be self-educating, self-teaching myself at least 3 to 4 hours every day. So if that means that I have to get up at 4 in the morning in order to do that, it's something that I do on a consistent basis, because I started to notice that because of all that head trauma, I was losing a lot of cognitive ability. And that's really what pushed me at least to have that drive to know that I really have to stay on my game and keep teaching myself and keep learning about how the mental processes work in order for me to really reach that level of achievement that I'm looking to get in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And so as far as answering your question goes of what rituals or habits, I mean, it really comes down to that self-education, but also certain mental conditioning exercises that I have to do each day in order.
Uh-oh. Yeah, you still there?
The cloudy head. I mean, when you're working the long hours that you're doing at your job, do you ever get those feelings of you want to work more and you're capable of accomplishing more, but just things going on in the head just aren't coming together, your ideas and things like that?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, it's kind of I don't want to say it's a roller coaster, because it's a bit of an exaggeration, but there are days where I feel like I could literally just talk to anyone, and
it just
it
comes
doesn't matter what comes out of my mouth. I'm just on, and then there are days where I'm not, mentally I'm not there, and every conversation's a little bit harder. I get a lot more no's, and it's funny how that works out.
Yeah, and so that's something that, I mean, if I hadn't done, or if I'm not doing these exercises every day, that's 24 hours for me. And so that's really where that drive came, to at least pursue people who understand how the mind works and to really model them, to take what they've learned and then apply it in my life, see if it works, and if it does work, see which ways on how I can improve it so that I can be mentally sharp as often as possible.
So when you're talking about 24 hours, I can just hear the urgency in your voice as far as how important your time is to you. And I think with a lot of dream chasers out there, I don't think we quite grasp how important our time is. I think it's something that we're told, and maybe to some degree we know, but actually applying it is a whole different idea.
Yeah, it's something that I've really started to realize how important it is as I've gotten a little bit older. I mean, right now I'm still in 27, so so I think I came to that realization about a year ago, where it really comes down to how much you can accomplish within the time that you have each day, and everyone has 24 hours in the day. It's who can really maximize that time and be most efficient and be most productive that are gonna reach the levels that I think that many of us aspire to be like, especially those that come on your podcast. The struggle is staying mentally clear, knowing really what your objectives are, what's most important, the ones that are going to deliver the biggest results, because we can keep ourselves busy doing anything. And in fact, I'd say the majority of young professionals, especially today, they have the mentality, they have the mindset of, oh, just life's so crazy, I have so much going on. But if you really look and examine at, what things they are doing, oftentimes it's in reaction to other people's demands. And I think that's a real big challenge that people face, especially young professionals, because as they respond or they react to other people's demands, a couple years, 10, 15 years down the road, they look up and they realize they're doing something that maybe they didn't or hadn't always planned on doing. And I think that's real tough, for the simple idea that you graduate college and you're real excited. Really anything is possible. The sky's the limit in essence. You get your job and all of a sudden things aren't as they maybe thought you thought they were going to be. And all of a sudden you find yourself reacting to other people's agendas, their immediate needs, their immediate demands, and you lose track of time. And so that's coming back to the question of time, why I think it's so important that you just consciously be aware of where you're placing your priorities and what outcomes you're striving to achieve.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And with regards to, do you do anything as far as like scheduling free time for yourself, or basically anything special with your schedule that may be a little different, that kind of like allows you to be clear? I know you on some hikes from what I've read, but anything else that you do with your schedule that you think would be useful?
Yeah, one thing that's really helped me, and me running my own company, I obviously have some freedoms that some other people might not have, specifically young professionals. Anytime that I feel cloudy-headed, I'll just take 10 minutes and take a quick nap. And I've found that just 10 minutes of focusing on absolutely nothing, and I guess a similar thing could be said for maybe meditation or something like that as well, but just 10 minutes of just totally getting away when I feel, that fog, that cloudy brain starting to come on, immediately delivers results and helps me become more productive. And I think what's important to recognize here, too, Lucas, is the fact that a lot of people get the sense that the more hours you work, the more productive you're going to be. When in fact, if you're working, let's say, 18-hour days, but you're not mentally there those 18 hours, you could take someone who's mentally sharp for 6 hours And I think you'd find that they could accomplish far more than that person who's working those longer hour days, simply because mentally they're not fully focused and checked in. They're not utilizing the full mental capacity that they have, which actually hurts your production and hurts the quality of your work.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal point. I think especially with young professionals, you're kind of in a space where you still want to have fun, and that may lead to a lack of mental clarity for various reasons that you could name off. Not wanting to even work is just kind of having the motivation to even go there in the first place. So I think that's an extremely important point. I mean, I know personally, I actually take walks. So if I feel like I am about to get on the phone and talk to someone and I'm kind of like in a negative space, I literally like just stop myself from doing whatever I'm doing and walk away, because I fortunately have a mentor or mentors who have kind of like told me like do pretty much the same thing that you were just saying, which is if you're not in a high state or you're kind of feeling in a bad place, don't get on the phone. Otherwise, it's going to come off to other people, and that's the last thing you want to do. I think you would probably echo this, and this isn't just if you're making sales calls. If you want to have an important conversation with your boss, or you're going to make a big presentation or anything like that, you got to make sure that you're in a great state.
Mm-hmm.
You can't always ensure it that you're going to be in a great state, because sometimes it's just how it works out. But just taking the time to do that, like each day, like working smarter, not harder, is something I've had to learn, because I was kind of I just work hard in general, and taking more time to actually make sure I'm like strategizing on what I'm doing rather than just working is been helpful for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one thing I think is important to note too, and I think I actually heard this from Gary Vaynerchuk. It was the idea that people were coming to him saying, well, I don't have to work 18-hour days because I work smarter. And I think Gary Vaynerchuk's reply was, well, I work smarter and I work harder. And I thought that was a very important thing to recognize. I mean, there's no working longer hour days if you can still stay mentally productive, mentally sharp. If you can do that, unbelievable. So by no means, I just want to make sure the message isn't getting across like you shouldn't be working those extended hours. But yes, right, what you just mentioned as well is very important. You've got to be mentally there. Especially, I mean, you made a great observation too, even over the phone. It comes through on your voice, your tone. And if you're tired, if you're lethargic, if you're not mentally there, whether it's a sales call or you mentioned talking with a mentor or the CEO of your company, they're going to recognize that something's going on, and in many ways it hurts you more than it will give you any benefit.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a perfect segue for how you got started being an entrepreneur, because here I'm talking about my experience in the corporate world a little bit. Can you talk about how you got started being an entrepreneur? You graduated from Colorado Boulder. Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or was it something that you just fell into?
It was always something I thought about. I mean, growing up, my dad starting and building his own, real successful insurance company in San Diego. It was almost like the idea, both of us went to Parker. We had the idea that, you go to Parker and you go to college. There's no questioning about not going to college. It's not even a thought. It's not even, you're not even going to a junior college. You're going to college. Right. Now, I think I was, one of the only people in my grade who maybe didn't go to an Ivy school. I went to Boulder.
No, I know what that's like. Yeah.
The caliber of people that go to Parker. let's just leave it at that. But that being said, to compare that to the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, starting your own business, I mean, there was really like, it was never a question. It was always something I was planning on doing. And the reason why, you know, I I look at what my dad did, the level of success he achieved, and then I look at the freedom that he also had. I mean, he coached all of our sports teams. He coached our football team, baseball, basketball, hockey, every team. He didn't miss a game. Even when he wasn't coaching us, he didn't miss a game. And so here's this remarkable man who was extraordinarily successful in business, but who also had an extraordinary family life.
Uh-huh.
And that's something that just always, rung true to me. It was something that I wanted to be able to, give my kids when I have them one day.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And so intellectual innovations. How did you find Larry Lynn, who is also your partner in another business? There's another business Blake runs. Did you find Larry? Did Larry find you? How did that come about? I don't think I actually know that.
Yeah, so I actually got introduced to Larry through my father. Larry Linney, he runs a number of successful companies. One of those is Insight Performance Group, which is a international insurance brokerage consultancy. And, he coaches my father. And so when I moved out here to Colorado after going to CU Boulder for 4 years, my dad, knowing the type of person that Larry was, connected me with him. Now, I wasn't working with him during this time. He was just always someone who was there for me, almost as like he was a mentor. And, it was a couple years at the time I was working for a real estate investment company in Boulder. And then when I decided to move on and look at starting a different business, that's when I connected with Larry, and he had an opportunity available that would allow me to work with him, side by side, one-on-one every day, while still pursuing other opportunities. And so that's how Larry and I connected.
And I bet you learned so much from Larry. I don't want to do you with the what are the top takeaways question, because I don't think that's really a fair one. But what would you say is, I guess in some ways, what have you learned from Larry that you think will be helpful for other people out there who are chasing their dreams that you've taken for yourself?
With what Larry's been able to accomplish, which is pretty extraordinary, with the results that he's been able to achieve. I mean, there are so many things to admire about him, but I think the one thing, this may sound kind of soft, but it rings true to me, is that he truly cares about each person that he works with. And when I say he truly cares, I mean it in a way that he's able to connect with them on a level to make them feel like they're there to make a difference, which then results in them producing at levels that they didn't expect themselves to produce at. So in essence, he gets them performing at levels that they never knew. If you can take your students, your players, or your employees and get them to accomplish something that they never really even dreamed of, or get them to perform at a level that they didn't know they were capable of, then you can transform not only an organization but thousands of lives. And so I think that starts with the fact that he just truly cares about the well-being of others, and he puts others before himself.
Yeah, and I think that brings up an awesome point just in general, which is connecting with people. And I think especially in our world today where social media is becoming more and more popular, is like actually being able to connect with people. And the key word is like actually, and like genuinely caring about them and their success. I think is going to be really a big difference maker for people who are successful and who are not, because if you're able to connect people who can help each other, and if you treat the guy who's your garbage man all the way up to your CEO the same, you never know. That garbage man could end up running a $5 million garbage business 10 years down the road. You just don't know. And I hear what you're saying, and in my experience too, I think it's so underrated, because we go to work, at least in my experience, I work in a big office. A lot of people don't even bother to connect with each other. Like, I go out of my way to try with people because I know that it's important to connect with the people that you work with. At the end of the day, that's what makes your work experience. I think a lot of young professionals and people even who are further down the road in their careers, it's just, you got to really develop deep connections with people.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one thing I've noticed, and I've definitely been guilty of this before, is when when you're working those long hours, oftentimes you can like put yourself in a trance to the point where like you're just kind of moving forward, not really paying attention to what's going on, not really conscious of everything that's going on. And I think the struggle with that, and bringing it back to the question of really being able to connect with people, is that when you're so focused, focus is probably the wrong word, but when you're just really becoming reactive to everything, whether it's emails or responding to the needs of others, you really forget what's truly important, and what makes salespeople, CEOs, whoever it may be, those that people admire most, is that ability to connect. And I think if you can just take time throughout the day to consciously realize or put yourself in that state of figuring out, how can I contribute even more to this person who I'm speaking with on the phone? Or what can I do to, help them see the benefits or the good in something that maybe they're struggling through right now? That personal connection oftentimes leads to something much more, and it gets them to produce at a much higher level.
Yeah, it's crazy. And even like little gestures, like my email signature now says "Be Phenomenal." And I had an executive assistant that I was working with the other week. I sent her a follow-up email, and she responded to that saying, "Oh, that's so cool that your email signature says "Be Phenomenal." There's no other way to be. I really like that, yada, yada, yada. And so I think, like you said, one of the things that's lost, especially in connection, is the little things. Like, those make such a big difference. That's how people remember you, are the little things, because you have all these different salespeople who are in the era of CEOs, all these different marketing people, and at the end of the day, how are you going to stand out? And I think that's something that you got to take time to think about, and it's kind of like getting to know yourself too. It's like, how, at the end of the day, what's going to make you different? And I think the small things that you do generously are ultimately what's going to, and generously, I mean, I'm not talking about sucking up to your boss. It's really caring that's going to make the difference in your career and ultimately your life.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Just be authentic.
Yeah, no, I think being authentic is extremely rare now, to find people who are going to be real with themselves and the world. And I think that's why what you're doing with Young Pro Elite is so important, is because I don't think there's ever been a more, granted, I'm super young, a more confusing time to be a young professional, because there's so much being thrown at our generation from social media, news. I mean, there's pressure that wasn't there before for like the high schoolers that are coming out of high school now. I was talking to a parent, and I was like, oh my God, they have it way worse than we did. Yeah. And I thought I had it pretty bad, and that's coming from a Parker kid too. Mm-hmm. So I was just kind of blown away, and I only think it's going to get worse as we move forward too.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of noise, and I think one of the challenges, especially with young professionals, if we relate it to acting in a certain way that maybe they're not being authentic, is that they have this image of who they maybe should be in certain situations or environments. And ultimately, if you look at what that image is and compare it to who they really are, that's where a lot of the stress and frustration comes from, because any time that you have a blueprint in your mind of who you should be or what you should accomplish at any stage in your career, and you're not living up to that blueprint, you're going to be stressed, you're going to be frustrated, simply because you know what you're capable of or you know what you want, but you're acting in a different way than you had originally planned. And when that happens, not being true to yourself, as simple as it may seem, it's going to create stress, frustration, it's going to create unhappiness.
No, totally, dude. I mean, I'm actually kind of going through that right now. I don't know
Yeah.
if you are to any degree either, but yeah, I had an image. Maybe it was just partly from Parker and being around successful people. It's just this idea of like how successful I want to be, and like I know I'm capable of doing so much with my life that at times I get frustrated with the actual reality of the situation because I feel like things aren't moving along fast enough. But it's like you said, though, it's because I created that image, you know, that I'm going to be popping bottles, driving a Lambo, doing all that stuff in my head, you know, like Drake style when I'm like 27, 28, but that's not actually the reality. And it's something that you know, I kind of have to like I don't slap myself like actually, but just be like, yo, like you're not, this isn't actually like what's happening right now. You're not in that space. That's not who you are, kind of thing.
Mhm. I mean, it definitely can be a reality. I think the issue, though, is trying to figure out what other people want you to be and then living up to that blueprint or identity. When in fact, anytime you focus on that, you actually, it's like you take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, as opposed to just figuring out, okay, really, who am I? Who am I when I'm at my best? Who am I when I'm performing at peak levels and helping others?
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily worrying about what other people think you may have to be, when in reality, oftentimes, especially that I found out, they're not even thinking about that. There's a lot of head trash, you know, that's you getting inside your head and making things up, which will just hurt you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, success is simple. I don't think that is said enough. It's been so complicated by all the different images that we have out there for what it means, and you know, really, it's just like up to you what your success is going to be. And if there's one thing I think I've learned that I want to share is like until you define what your success is for you, then you're just going like it's kind of like you've been saying already, is that you're not going to really get to where you want to be unless you've defined what your success, not what everyone else, including mom and dad. I mean that's another thing that is tough. I don't know about your parents, Blake, but I know I love my parents, but there's also a defined level of expectation that they have for me as far as like I have to have a job, I should be making money. Like there's, you know, shitload of sacrifice that went into me being me, and you know, when I told them I was doing this, they were scared because they were like, "Oh, how are you gonna make money? How are you?" And don't I was like, "Don't worry about that. Like I'm still gonna do my job, you know." And
Mm-hmm.
it's ultimately coming down to as long as you know what you're doing for you, you know, the outside noise is gonna be there no matter what you do, especially if you're trying to do something big. So I think that's something that you could also probably touch on. Me, it sounds like your dad has been super supportive, but just in the case of, you know, just keeping all that out is especially when you're an entrepreneur and you're not making a ton of money right off the bat or even just for an extended period of time, that's tough.
Mm-hmm. It is. And, you know, fortunately, I've always had supportive parents, and yeah, they do have certain standards, but I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. I see it as a big part of becoming the person who I became today, is that there's a certain standard that my family's expected to live up to. And ultimately, that standard, though, helps make, not only our family lives better, but the lives of the people who we know. It's almost the idea, and this may sound a little old school, of your last name. It's the idea of me being a Cavignac. There's a certain standard to that. It's a reputation that my dad built in San Diego. And there's nothing that, my greatest fear is essentially tarnishing that name. Because I know how hard my father and my brother, work to do the right thing every day, to give back as much as they can. And so getting back to really the point of, I think you were getting into the idea of, being an entrepreneur and there being a lot of that outside noise or that outside influence of, are you sure this is like really the best use of your time? How are you going to make money? How are you going to pull through or support yourself? Ultimately, I think it comes back to your cause. Why are you doing it? And if the cause, if the reason, if the purpose is strong enough, it's going to push you through those tough times where maybe you're not making the money. And simply because it gives you that mentality that if you keep pushing forward, there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. Something is going to happen in your favor, but you've got to keep going forward. And if you give up and give in just because it gets tough, well, that's what the majority of people do. And that's why when a lot of parents, they have a reason, a right to be scared. It's because the majority of people do fail. But I think if you have that mentality of, burn the bridges, burn the boats, there's no way we're going back, then you're going to really position yourself to succeed. Now, whether that's in a few months or if that's a couple of years, it's different for every person. But you have to have that mentality of there's no option but to move forward. And as long as you have something to fall back on, as long as you have like a plan B, then you know that, okay, one way or another, if this doesn't work out, that's okay, because I can go back to doing this and I'll be able to support myself. And when you think about that ounce of, it could really be any amount, but that ounce of uncertainty is, I think, what causes a lot of people to give in, because they know that they have another option.
Yeah, and how would you say the best way to deal with that uncertainty is, because it's just everywhere?
Mm-hmm. For me, the way I deal with it, it comes back to the mental conditioning exercises, using my physiology, tone of language, my focus, and really conditioning that, hours every day. The best way I've found to really overcome that challenge is to put myself in the mentality that the fact of the matter is I am supported, which is a struggle for me right now that I have to face, because I do have plans, not plans that I thought up. I'm just very fortunate in the sense that I have the people in my life who could support me should something go bad. But I have to mentally train myself to almost act as if they're not there.
Right.
The only way I can do that is by consciously focusing on that at certain times throughout the day. I've almost got to trick my mind into thinking there's no other option. I have to make this work.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you on that one. And tricking your mind in a lot of ways, I think, is something that is also not mentioned enough. Les Brown, who's a famous motivational speaker, for those of you who don't know, always says that the mind is is like inherently negative to some degree. And to do a lot of things, like for me, I don't know about you, But when I have to make a sales call to someone for like the fourth or fifth time, there's always part of me that's going, don't do that. You don't want to bug them. There's all the normal trash as you would say, but then there's the part of me that's like, that they could have just be busy. There's all the potential positives as well, and I think there's drawing the distinction between knowing when you just gotta go and not that. And this kind of goes back to your point about what stops a lot of people is they let that uncertainty in their mind finally just get to the point where they're just like, I'm done. I'm quitting. And Seth Godin says too that you just got to ship. There's a great quote from his book Lynchpin. I don't know. Have you read that book before?
Yep.
Man, that's a freaking good book. But he says, and for everyone who's listening, Lynchpin is an awesome book. Says you just got to ship. It doesn't matter what's going on in your mind, whether it be you got to do a blog post, you got to do whatever you're doing. You just got to do it if it really means something to you, because otherwise you're going to be able to talk yourself out of it, and then the rest is history because you only have so much time.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned the amount of sales calls. If you're about to contact someone for the fourth or fifth time, I keep seeing this. It's this like statistics on. I see a lot of salespeople posted on LinkedIn. I think up on the wall. It's like 40% of salespeople never follow up with a prospect. I think it's 25% of salespeople make a second contact and stop, and then it's the percentages go down. Like 12% of salespeople make a third contact and stop, and maybe like 2% make a fourth or fifth and stop. But then what you start to notice is it then goes up and says like after 10 to 12 contacts, that's when 80% of sales are made. And I think just those statistics are important. I mean, this is a little off topic, but it's important to keep in mind because as you had mentioned, sometimes they may be on vacation or they maybe didn't see your email, they didn't see your call. So just like with anything in life, those that persist and keep moving forward and have that belief or condition their minds to believe that someone truly needs this or this is going to be of value to someone, therefore I have to keep reaching out until I get an answer, even if it's a no. And if it's no, I'm going to find a way to turn that into a yes. It's critical.
Yeah, I think that's in everything. It's not just sales too. I mean, it's writing, it's managing, it's all the above.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I really enjoyed having you on the show. I always learn so much from having people like yourself on the show. And before we wrap this up, is there anything you'd want to share with the audience before we end this broadcast?
I just appreciate you putting Dreamchasers on. I think it's an exciting project that could turn into something much bigger, especially knowing you, the drive, the desire that you have to make your mark, to create something that's bigger than yourself, and bringing together entrepreneurs who necessarily haven't made it or achieved a certain level of success to the point where everyone wants to interview them or get their thoughts, but you're interviewing the people who are really just in the beginning stages or in the middle of trying to get to those levels. Mm-hmm. I think it's admirable what you're doing, so I'm excited to see where this goes, and I'm excited to see all the great things you're going to be accomplishing.
I appreciate that, man, and I'd say that right back to you too, because I know you got big things coming for you with Young Pro Elite.
I appreciate that, Lucas. It means a lot to be on this. Thank you.
All right, brother. Well, have a good night, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
All right, take it easy.
See ya.